Thank you so much for coming to the second talk in our spring seminar series. Today we'll be hearing from Susan Swinford and Emily Riles for a talk called Filling Plates, Not Landfills. A Columbus native, Susan Swinford took the reins of Food Rescue US Columbus just before the COVID-19 shutdown necessitated a rapid recalibration of how to fight food insecurity and food waste. In the midst of a pandemic, this effort takes many forms and requires many adaptations. Whether empowering volunteers to deliver meals prepared by local restaurants and funded with emergency grants, or working with community service leaders to revamp food distributions with social distancing. Susan recruited Emily Riles to join her as assistant site director shortly after concluding Food Rescue's work with the Wait Initiative, which provided food to 20,000 Central Ohioans. Together, Susan and Emily have coordinated the distribution of over 2.5 million pounds of food through the USDA Farmers to Families program, while also expanding the day-to-day food rescuing opportunities and outreach available to food rescue volunteers through the organization's website. Their focus is minimizing food waste by diverting excess food away from landfills and onto the plates of food insecure families, using the food rescue model to reach and empower communities and individuals outside or with less access to Columbus's existing food support network. Susan and Emily, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Isabel. I am getting ready to share my screen. It will make it harder for me, at least, to see if anybody has a hand raised or is trying to ask a question. So I feel like I speak for Susan and myself when I say, please jump in whenever and as the spirit might move you. So let me get this up and going. There we go. So as Isabel said, we are the site director and assistant site director of Food Rescue US Columbus, which is one of 35 now, I think, food rescue branches around the country. Food rescue started as community plates in 2011, and Columbus was one of the original sites where food rescue came to be, and the model has expanded pretty dramatically since then. Where we wanted to start, if I can, there we go. Where we wanted to start, I think, is with this framing of some of the main problems that we are grappling with as Food Rescue, and specifically Food Rescue Columbus, which is an articulation by Karen Washington. All people have a right to healthy food and water. The problem is not lack of food, because we indeed have enough food to feed the world. The problem is how to get it to the people that need it the most. So this slide is, go ahead, Susan. You're muted.
No, you can go ahead and I'll figure out how we're going to rotate, because I was just, you looked at me, but I don't know how to step in. Go ahead.
We had the presentation. The actual sharing of the mic, slightly less. We're basically the same speaker in certain moments, and so it makes actually handing off discussion a little awkward. The information on this slide, I suspect, will not be shocking to those of you who have been paying attention to food insecurity in Ohio and nationally. I think particularly since the pandemic, there has been so much attention on the ways that the pandemic has compounded existing situations. But for the sake of having numbers, it is worth knowing that more than 17% of Franklin County residents were food insecure before the pandemic set in. And among the households that were receiving food stamp assistance, again, before the pandemic, more than half of them included at least one child. And if I'm remembering right, about a third of them were also housing elderly people. Since the pandemic has set in, Ohio has had the 10th highest rate of projected food insecurity, which is, so this is interesting. We're tied with Kentucky at 18.1%. 18.1% of Kentucky's population, however, is like it's a little less than a third of this number of people. So 18.1% of Ohio's population is a lot of folks who are having trouble accessing food. And another way to think about that is that almost a third of the families who visited Mid-Ohio pantries last year were new to the pantry system.
And another piece of all of that data that I'm sure you're all aware of is that there are a lot of people who don't get counted in these kinds of accounts. And those are some of the people that we are striving to serve during what we've been doing, simply because there are people who either don't have access to those pantries or who are hesitant to be interacting with official entities, and so are not able to seek food in some of these ways. They won't sign up for SNAP, or they won't do some of those things.
Mm-hmm. Or won't have access to going to pantries in the first place because of work hours or because of concerns about going out. The other piece of this is food waste, which I know is something about which you all know a great deal. This is a problem that is both really local and also obviously global in its scope and implications. So I suspect you're already familiar with the fact that more than a third of the United States viable food supply ends up in landfills. And that once that food hits landfills, it accounts for almost a quarter of methane emissions in the US. One of the partners that we work with a fair amount is SWACO, who have compiled a lot of really great statistics about exactly how much waste is being produced in Franklin County and in Central Ohio. So they are the source for this sort of staggering idea that 145 potential meals per Franklin County resident end up going into landfills, and that food waste also accounts for the waste of 41 billion gallons of water.
Some of which is less of an issue for us with lack of it, with more access to water than a lot of areas of the country, but because some of that food is being produced in other places, we're really wasting water that actually can't afford to be wasted in a number of places.
Mm-hmm. So with that context in mind, enter us and also you. Food Rescue US, regardless of where it is operating, though these are pictured, all of the pictures here are from Columbus. Food Rescue US works really by connecting donors and locations that have excess food with places that need food through local volunteers who agree to give up their time and gas and car space to transport donations. Part of what this means is that we are able, like I got a phone call or a text today asking about some produce boxes that an apartment complex had left over. And we were able to find a person within a few minutes to go and pick up those produce boxes and take them somewhere, because it is a very sort of small and locally oriented operation, where really what we are doing is connecting local donors and local social servants agencies, often just sort of through our phones or through email, and helping volunteers become part of a sort of ecosystem community of getting to know where food might be needed when and how to get it there.
Yeah, we also got a text today from a pantry, and they pretty regularly let us know when they will not be able to serve all of the food that they've received. So they will get it in, they serve meals, and then if they're not going to be able to use it before they are next going to have open hours, they ask us to come and get it, and we take it on to another pantry. So it is a nice way. The way we fit into this ecosystem is that we can accommodate a lot of the stuff that someone as big as Mid-Ohio doesn't want to deal with, or that other people don't spend as much time on. But when you think about all of the food that's getting wasted, a lot of it is some of the smaller scale stuff that we can step in and help with.
So a glimpse of some of the people that we are working with on a regular basis. This slide is really just to sort of demonstrate that we are picking up, like, these are places that we're picking up on a weekly and sometimes a daily basis from all over the city. So we pick up from 3 Hot Chicken Takeover locations and 3 Fox in the Snow locations. This slide, the picture with all of the donuts, is a pickup that we do from Schneider's Bakery in Westerville. But we're also in Easton and at the North Market and down the street from OSU campus at the Mikeys there. And we are then able to match all of those different food sources with places that are close, or as close as we can get them, but also sort of aligned in the kinds of food that they're able to receive. So we are able to be really careful about tailoring what kinds of food are going to work best for which organizations, and making sure that they don't get overwhelmed with bagels, which is a real problem. But that the places that need bagels can have as many bagels as they would want. And that places that can take bagels but would rather have prepared like pans of restaurant food are getting as much of both of those things as we can manage.
So as we, because I took over right before the pandemic started and did not have an opportunity to be trained in the job because of the situation with an illness with the previous site director, a lot of what we've been doing for the past year, me and Emily, is to get things reoriented to face, to deal with COVID, which resulted in a lot of shutdowns for normal donors that we had, a lot of sort of negotiating how to get that up and running again, and really seeking other sources. So we did manage, we got to do the WAIT program and then the Farmers to Families, which we've been doing since July. But as we've had a little bit of time to breathe during the winter, we've been working on thinking about where we want food rescue to be heading. And a lot of that is articulated here in this slide, which is that rescuing food, so keeping surplus food from landfills, is the whole reason for food rescue generally. And those 2 points are pretty obvious. We want to go a little bit farther in thinking about how we work within the context of Columbus, which is to say we definitely want to be getting food to the food insecure. We definitely want to be keeping it out of landfills. But we're also looking at the way we fit into a community that already has a number of major players and some structures already in place. How do we partner with them? How do we find new people to partner with and collaborate? And how do we see this not as a competition for these resources, but as a way to really help complete the effort in Central Ohio? What can we do? We've learned a lot about the fact that we have a pretty lean and flexible model. How do we utilize that as best we can to build connections among organizations that are all trying to do the same kind of work, to bring in other partners, to reach people who aren't normally being reached, and to build an awareness of the sort of larger social justice and simply social issues that are inherent in looking at these problems. You know, we are aware that 2 white women running an organization that has rescue in the title has some issues inherent in it, and that the way we talk about and think about doing this kind of service matters in terms of how we empower the people we're working with. And a lot of what we really want to do is find ways to empower the other individuals who are doing this work, who we're getting food to, because the most astonishing thing has not been our volunteers, although we have really amazing volunteers. And that has been a great antidote to everything that's gone on all year. But more than that, it is the number of people within the community who are working with very little notice, trying to get food to people around them, and the number of grassroots efforts that are going on. So It's partly finding ways to help those people do what they're doing more efficiently. And we are in a good position to do that because we can tailor what kind of food we deliver. Like some of the food that we pick up from that other pantry, it's like they have 15 crates of limes, and that is food. It's definitely food that they were given by whoever donated it, but it is very hard to feed a population of people living on the streets with boxes of limes. So that was some creativity to figure out who can use these limes. And that required actually sending it to a lot of different places so that we could ensure that there weren't just people throwing away those limes. So it is, we are in an interesting place, and that's one of the reasons we're very excited to be talking to you and to reaching out to try to get people involved with this, is that we want this to be as vital as possible, to do as much different kinds of work for the people who are volunteering and for the people that we are partnering and collaborating with. Did you have something to add in?
No, except that that leads very nicely into what I think is another articulation of the struggle that we are both sort of aware of entering into and also trying to foreground as we move forward, which is, as articulated here, not just making sure that everyone has nutrients and enough nutrients to be healthy and flourishing, but also making sure that we all recognize each other as people worthy of a voice, and therefore people with dignity who are not just recipients but co-creators. And that includes, I think, thinking about food rescue volunteers and donors as recipients and co-creators within an ecosystem of other recipients and co-creators. And some of that is, and we'll talk about how this works a little bit in a minute, one of the ways that we have found to try to just sort of facilitate making sure that food is getting to people who already have pantries and are already doing particular kinds of work is saying, if it is easier for you because of your pantry setup to be the rescuer who goes and picks up from Little Caesars, so that you're not waiting for a volunteer to come at a certain time, but you're able to go on your own schedule, that's great. We'll make sure that you are the rescuer in the system and you can go and do that rescue when it suits your schedule. You are the one who gets to establish that communication with the donor. And it is a way that we are able to use this sort of infrastructure that we have received from food rescue to build an infrastructure that goes beyond what our individual volunteers are doing, if that makes sense.
It also means that we can have school groups do this kind of work, or anytime a pantry is going to be closed, they simply unclaim, and we'll tell you more about how the app works, but they unclaim it for that day. We'll still go and get the food, so they don't have to worry about it on the days they're not open. They just do something pretty quick on the app, and then we can make sure it gets covered. We also have a Goodwill group that uses doing rescues as a way of getting some of the people they work with involved in some of this work. So there are ways that runs can be set up and be tailored. So our system ends up being one in which there can be a number of set ones that serve certain volunteers or certain groups pretty well. And we also have a number that are open and can be claimed at any time, so people with more complicated schedules can participate and be involved when it suits them.
And part of what this means is, this is just bragging on how much cool work our volunteers did in the last year a little bit, in part because what we have is this core of volunteers who are able to go onto this website and see what rescues are available and just sort of click, yeah, I'll go down to Locke's Bagel Shop. I'm a block away from there and I will pick up those bagels and just tell me where to take them. In part because we have that group, and in part because the website that we're working with allows for that kind of flexibility that Susan was talking about, even in the midst of the pandemic having shut down, at least temporarily, a large number of the donors that we usually work with. We ended up being able to rescue more than 2.5 million pounds of food. And that's not including what we're going to talk about in a second, which is the farmers to families stuff. This is 2.5 2.5 million pounds of food that are like the bakeries and the restaurants and the farmers markets and those kinds of things. I think especially if you are a volunteer doing a particular run, sometimes it's a little hard to see the scale where every single little rescue really adds up. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, right, that one shopping bag that I pick up every week actually does. It's not just that it's making a difference in terms of the pantry or the people who go to that pantry, but also that is a shopping bag full of bagels that doesn't go into a landfill every week. And that adds up in terms of pounds and in terms of saved money. All right, the website. This is in part really just to show you the range of places that we are going on a day-to-day basis. Right now, the way the website works is that what Susan and I see is what you see on the right side of the screen, which is every single day a list of all of these rescues. This does not, by the way, include the one from the apartment complex because I put this in yesterday. But what you can see is in a single day, we've got rescuers going to all these different places. A rescuer who goes into the website right now will only see the rescues that are in orange. Those are the ones that are still open for somebody to claim. So a rescuer might not realize that we're going to Hilliard and also Easton and also Clintonville and also Westerville on Tuesday. Tuesday, by the way, is one of our lighter days. But what we are able to see is this giant network, which is visualized slightly differently on the left, of recipients that are really widely spread all over the city and donors that are widely spread. We would like to expand. You can see the parts of the map where we are continuing to work on recruiting more donors. But that is part of what makes this work really extraordinarily helpful, is being able to see the network that we are already serving and then being able to sort of fine tune our efforts and our volunteers' outreach efforts to figure out how we can build rescues and opportunities for doing this kind of work more broadly.
And we do have a dream that we have asked the tech developers, so eventually people will be able to see everything again, which I think engages people a little bit more with the overall process. Because right now you can get on and you're like, oh, they don't have any runs today, and they've just all been taken.
Which is great, and also,
yeah.
So Farmers to Families is not in the app, but is the other big thing that we have been doing since, as Susan said, July of last year. I think Farmers to Families has been pretty well covered in the news in terms of what it is doing. But these are food boxes that are subsidized by USDA and are sent to distributors nationally that are then able to get boxes. The idea is that each box will work for a family. Sometimes, depending on the size of the family, you want 2 or 3 boxes for a family, but it's got usually 2 protein sources and 3 or 4 fruits and vegetables and a gallon of milk and some cheese. And so the idea is that this will work as groceries, sort of foundation for a family. And we started doing this in July when it was a lot of really lovely, like we had corn one week and we had cantaloupe one week because there were so many things in season. We currently are getting a lot of apples and potatoes and
onions and grapefruit.
A lot of onions. But it also in some ways means like the boxes are different too. The boxes are different every week. But basically what happens is what you see in this picture, which is that on Friday and or Saturday every week, we receive between 1 and 3 tractor trailers full of these boxes. We unload them in a parking lot, and then we have volunteers load boxes into their cars and deliver them to different spots all over the city. Some of them are receiving agencies that were listed here, but a lot of them, this has been a way that we've been really able to push on thinking about how we can reach folks for whom pantry hours are not accessible. So we have really prioritized going to supportive and transitional housing complexes, going to dropping off with people in recent immigrant communities who are able to basically do their own mini distributions in those neighborhoods. Go to 2 or 3 blessing box locations, 2 in Linden, and I think we've done 1 in Grove City. We've got like really anywhere we can find that wants boxes. And then we've got probably 15 either small organizations or in a lot of cases, church and mosque groups that will come pick up boxes from us. So we are not responsible for taking all of them. But there is the mosque on Riverview Drive sends a truck every Friday, and we take the meat out of their boxes because the meat is not halal. And we have a different pantry that will send a truck to pick up the meat because their clients love having the extra meat, and the mosque will come, and sometimes they come at the same time, and it is perfect. The mosque gets their vegetarian boxes and takes them off, and it allows for the spreading of resources that otherwise would be really tough to get those needs met.
And this is a lot of where we really met a lot of the people who are doing pretty amazing work. If you think about last weekend, we had 2 tractor trailers full of boxes, so 2,400 boxes on Friday, and then an additional 2,400 boxes on Saturday, which were all pulled out by volunteers, unloaded by a forklift, which some of our volunteers have gotten comfortable with. We do have forklift drivers come, and then they are loaded, like you see there, into cars or into a U-Haul. We have a number of our car drivers who were willing to pivot to driving U-Hauls for us to get these boxes out. But that's when you really, that's when it sort of snowballs. Once you start doing this, one person will say, oh, well, I talked to my friend who's in this church, or they were hoping to get this here, or there's another housing complex here. And the scope of the need and the number of people who were not being reached by some of the more conventional forms. We had pretty good relationships with a lot of shelters and pantries, but I had no idea until we started doing this just how far reaching and how much grassroots work there was trying to get food to people. So people will pull up and say, I don't need food for me. If you have any spare boxes though, I have an elderly neighbor. Would you mind if I took something for her? So it's been pretty remarkable.
And we really have gotten to the point now where people we have been giving boxes to, people we were giving boxes to in like November, have given our phone number to 2 or 3 other people who have then, like, it is this sort of extraordinary rhizomatic thing that all of a sudden it's like, I end up having to write down in my own notes, like, okay, this is this person who I know from this person who I think was referred maybe by this person, because I want to have a sense. But really what it means is like people are willing to drive from all over to pick up boxes that they are then taking back to their neighborhood. Or we have a forklift driver who volunteers his time. He lives down the street. And he just happened to drive by one day and was like, I see that you are struggling, because our forklift driver had to leave that day. So just in case you ever need help, here's my phone number. Give me a call. I live down the street. And he has come a couple times that our regular forklift driver has been away. And it becomes this sort of extraordinary, I hate the word synergy, but like it is a cooperative thing in a way that is really beautiful. The other image on this slide is between July and December, all of the orange squares are locations that we took farmers to families boxes at least once. And there are now probably 10 or 12 additional spots that we have started taking to since January, just because some places have gotten new sources of food or are otherwise less less in need in that particular way. One of the other things that is true about Farmers to Families is that because it is a federal program, from time to time, there is a lag in getting things finalized. So between December 30th was our last, right? I think December 30th was our last 2020 distribution. Between then and when we started up again, it was almost a full month. And one of the outcomes of having this real sense of community gathering in this parking lot on Groveport Road was realizing that and really sort of panicking about the number of people we knew were taking these boxes, and that is what they had to eat for the week until we could get them more boxes. And so one of the things that we have been really happy about doing during that hiatus and also subsequently is this collaboration with Together and Company, which is the parent company for Sweet Carrot and also Kitties. And they are a fabulous catering company who reached out, got a grant from White Castle that allows them to pay their employees to source and then prepare meals, which we are then able to deliver twice a week to some of the spots that were most acutely struggling when we weren't able to be delivering Farmers to Families boxes. This has been 8 weeks, and I think we've got 2 more weeks going with this. It's 750 meals. They smell really delicious and are really good. And we're able to get them to some of the sites that it also helps because some sites aren't able to take Farmers to Families boxes anymore, just from timing and staffing reasons. And so this has been another way that we've been able to get volunteers continuing to go to those spaces and continuing to support those residents or those clients without it being with a giant, like a U-Haul full or even a car full of 35-pound boxes. So part of the reason that we're very happy to be telling you all about this is that there are a lot of ways that you yourselves can be part of our food rescue network, and we would be delighted to have you on the team. The most obvious, maybe, way is by signing up as a rescuer, and we can talk about what that looks like and how that works. / Katie can tell you, and Ashwarya can tell you. But I also, the other thing on this slide is that not everybody has ready access to a car. Not everybody has ready access to blocks of time that work with that map that I showed you. And so the other thing that we really just wanted to enforce is that there are a lot of ways to be part of what we're doing. Among them is, by all means, reach out with your ideas about sources of potential donations or locations that you think would be interested in being a receiving site. If you know of other volunteer groups that might be interested in working with us, like Susan said, we are really happy, to set up regular rescues with groups or trios or whatever, whatever size group of people want to take on a run, we can absolutely do that. We can also give you information about the Farmers to Families signing up. We are on Facebook, but also, if you are not aware of the Food Soldier Facebook group, I strongly encourage you to check out what they are doing. The woman who runs and moderates that page, Rochelle, is herself fabulous, but also really emphasizes getting information out about any time there are sources of food for people across the city, sort of amplifying that information. And she has built a network of people who will say, I have remaining leftover food from this pickup, or just like I have leftovers from having made food for some event. If anybody needs it, here's how to get it. And I think I mentioned before the Save More Than Food initiative, which is doing a lot of work to encourage minimizing food waste in a variety of different ways. And their website has a lot of really useful information. And keep doing what you're doing.
I would just say, one thing that would be extraordinarily helpful if you guys are interested, facilitating the donation setup is actually a huge deal. Most of we have added 4 new sites since the start of January. And initially we were like, oh, we can do a lot. We set our goal for 5. It is more challenging to persuade some groups than you might think. Easton, for instance, has established a restaurant group and all their restaurants have been given the owner's strongly worded wish that they would be participating in both composting and food being donated. And I was on a call with a lot of them, and it turns out that when they were offered free composting setup, all of them were offered free composting. 4 organizations, so 4 restaurants chosen. And I presented to them, and they are in the midst of a year in which, even with their really good numbers, they are struggling to get anywhere near where they were, and still thinking about the implications. A lot of restaurants have shut down in that area. Others are still starting up, and they're very busy and running on skeleton crews. And I get why this isn't the first thing they want to do, but most of our effective new donors have come when either Emily or I, or more likely one of our rescuers, goes in and talks to the person. And even sometimes when you do talk to people, there are reasons why they're dealing with accounting, they're dealing with how that works. And it takes some persistence, but I have found that a lot of the time, a lot of the larger chains already have commitments in some places. Kroger does, Panera does, different things like that. So we get some Panera, but not all of it. But a lot of the individual places will think that they don't have enough, or that it's not worth their while, or that it will be too much effort. Even getting set up with Dublin Methodist Hospital, they didn't think that they were going to have food, and they really didn't think it was worth doing. Now they donate almost every week. So it is a question of just getting in the door and talking to someone about it and being able to assure them, it's not going to be a problem. Let me help you with it. But if anybody's interested in that kind of work, there's a lot of food that's going to waste in that way. And some of the people working in those restaurants or in bakeries are sad that they're throwing it out. But that's what they're ordered to do. And we can make that difference. So that is even, a thing that we could use a lot of help with, or that we're pushing in the direction of trying to do more with that.
The final slide I have for you is just because our rescuers are lovely, and our receiving and donating agencies are lovely. The top right photo here is the crew at the pantry that we pick up from, who helped load up the van with apples and sweet potatoes that day. I think just giant crates of apples and sweet potatoes. But this, I think, also gives you a sense that the middle top picture is from a day when one of our rescuers got a call from a different group she works with that there were 27 bags like that of brownies that were going to be thrown out. And she asked if she could, it was in the middle of a farmers to families, and she said, I am willing to go in the U-Haul that I already rented and pick them up and bring them back here. And then we can just send, when we do big deliveries, we can just send a bag of brownies with them. And the number of sites that were like, those brownies were great, was a lot. It was a big number. We've also got, top left is the aforementioned shopping bag full of bagels. Bottom left is part of a Whole Foods pickup. We pick up from the Whole Foods at East End a few times a week, and it is routinely like your car is totally full in a really delightful way, because then you just get to be like, here, have all of this extraordinary grocery. Hot chicken takeover, pans of prepared food in the middle bottom, and then the bottom right is one of my favorite humans who is named Leslie, and who is one of these people that we have gotten in touch with through Farmers to Families. Those are Farmers to Families boxes behind her. She was organizing a drop off at a long-term, like an extended stay hotel for the residents there over the summer and into the autumn, with the recognition that many of the people who were staying in that location were there because they had previously been unsheltered, and this was the option that had been given to them during the pandemic. And so she was willing to get the boxes and make sure that they got distributed, and it was this sort of extraordinary collaboration. And then when she actually moved, couple weeks went by, and then she texted me and said, all right, I'm ready to start again. When can you start bringing them to this apartment complex? I have found some families in this apartment complex who could really use some food. So part of the reason for this slide is just that the people we work with are fabulous, and I like getting to show their excitement, but also that even sort of in this collage of images is a pretty clear sense of the different kinds of rescues we do and communities that we are trying to move into and serve with different kinds of food as they are available. And that is the end of our presentation proper. But we are also, so I'm going to stop sharing because that way I can actually see people.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm happy to see names. I'm fine with that. We'd be really happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks for that presentation, Emily and Susan. You're really amazing work that you're doing. There's one question in the chat. Are there any controls or policies that Food Rescue US has in place to ensure donated food products are safe for consumption? I know access to proper storage and transportation conditions is a barrier for many food pantries to receiving high-risk foods such as dairy, meat, and prepared foods.
You're muted.
Okay. The Farmers to Families program is set up so that they freeze their meat when they put it in, and the food comes in refrigerated trucks. And so that is that you guarantee you're going to be getting the food out in a certain amount of time. And that was considerably more high stress when it was hot than it is now when it is not. The rest of the food we pick up, shelf-stable food, we can pick up refrigerated food, and we can pick up frozen food, but we don't pick up warm or hot food. We can't guarantee that we can transport that and keep it to the temperature. So, and all of our runs are established so that they are a minimum amount of time, which is to say, we try to partner to put a donor site with a recipient site that's a pretty close distance. So the volunteers are not supposed to be keeping food. They're taking food from one site to another where it will be stored. But it is some of the negotiation in figuring out if someone has a place to store that food. You know, we have to keep tailoring things. Sometimes someone's freezer goes out and we have to send that food somewhere else. There is no doubt that a lot of the organizations we work with are on shoestring budgets, and there are a lot of variables involved. But what is in place is which is that we take food that is at the colder end of the spectrum or shelf stable, but we don't take, and you know, we can take room temperature food if it's baked goods, things like that, but not cooked food.
Thank you. I have a question about how you go about approaching donors, or what are some of the reasons that they're hesitant to participate in as being a donor?
In a couple instances, and these are the ones that I don't mind much, some of our existing donors during the pandemic turned to giving their food to their employees. That was fun. That makes perfect sense. Kitty's Cupcakes is owned by Together and Company. I know what all of their commitments are. We used to pick up from Sweet Carrot. I've been campaigning with the manager of Kitty's. She's on board. She wants to do it. Something is happening with management in terms of figuring out how they deal with that write-off or that accounting. And I don't know what that issue is. But we run into snags like that. I think that a lot of times people just think it will be a lot of trouble. Whole Foods Dublin was throwing out food because it was very close to its expiration date, and they are instructed to throw it out. And they said, and I said, but we can use that. And I know you won't be able to get it somewhere in time. And I said, I can though. I can get it somewhere in time. That's the fun part. And I think that some of it is that the logistics for certain groups, because it does take longer if you're waiting for a big truck to come and get food. So that's a piece sometimes. Some of it is just, if you've got a site like Fox in the Snow, they have a lot of different managers. They don't want to have calls coming in because at closing time is precisely when they're busy. So they actually, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but what they do is Emily and I are both on a text chain, and whoever's the manager that day texts to say whether there's a donation or not. And then we have to text whoever signed up for that rescue. But that was the workaround to get them willing to do it, because they didn't want to have to keep answering a call about it or to give out all their phone numbers. And then, I mean, sometimes it's the cost of the containers that they'll put the food in. So for kolache, we have small containers, and those rotate between where they are, where we pick up at kolache and where they're dropped off. We can't do that for every site that we pick up. It's definitely one of the things that they're thinking about at Kitty's, I know, because boxes are more expensive. It's the thing that we do for Schneider's, which is to have food safe bins. And we pick up from them 5 out of the 6 days they're open, which means we've got sets of giant bins for 6 or 5 different sets of runners. 6 actually, because Mondays is split in 2. But it works for them because the owner is very committed to making that donation. It would cost them a lot in boxes to box all those up. And the people who receive those donuts enjoy them a lot. Like, we are aiming to get healthy food to people, and we are aiming to make sure that a lot of nutritional needs are met. And that's some of why we push at some of the places, other restaurants. Bakeries are much easier to get to donate if it's not cost prohibitive. But at the same time, there are places that can't serve prepared food or can't prepare it. And there are places where, sometimes a donut is a thing that makes a day a lot better than it would otherwise be. So some of the food we take there, we take to some of the homeless shelters or to Ronald McDonald House, but places where having something to set out like that makes a difference. But it's a weird combination of things that keep people from trying it. And it really is sort of, if I can get in there and talk to them, or Emily can get in and talk to them, or a runner who knows it pretty well. We have one guy who talks to a lot of people. They do a great job. And people are almost uniformly excited about the idea. People who work in the restaurant industry don't want to be wasting food. It's not always the people we're talking to who are making the decisions, though.
I think, going off actually Allison's question as well a little bit, another hesitation that I haven't encountered as much currently, but I do think is a consideration for some people, is a concern about liability. And so in that case, it's really saying like there is a law in place which protects people from liability if donated food that is donated in good faith and delivered safely causes someone to be ill. There is legal protection there. So I think that goes along with the tax write-offs for food donation have been historically really mercurial, and there hasn't been a lot of consistency in what that write-off looks like or what the process is. And so for some places, it's what are we going to put it in, or how can we hold on to it until you can get here, or we need back the container that you have put it in. And then for other people, it's the sort of legal and policy focused stuff about what are the larger implications of what we're doing. But as Susan said, pretty much like this is the kind of situation where it's like, you don't want to be throwing the food out. We can help you with that. And you know that it's going to people who actually need food. And so everybody wins.
Yeah, definitely. It's frustrating to see some of these barriers, and it's really not an issue, but yeah, I think there's a perception that people don't want to be responsible if something happens, but okay. Are there any other questions?
I think Emily's typing something.
Usually, so I teach on Zoom all the time, and usually if I'm going to be typing something into the chat, I will go ahead and mute myself, but I felt like I was just going to go ahead and do that now. I feel I would be remiss if we did not actually give you both the sign up link for joining us for Farmers to Families and also the website for signing up to be a rescuer more generally. This is, like, as you saw, we've got sort of our big distributions that we do every week, and then also all of the day-to-day stuff. And the day-to-day stuff is accessible to you through registering on the website that I just put in the chat. We are, I think, I don't quite know the institutional history here, but I think for a while there were student groups at OSU that were themselves sort of a rescuer in the food rescue system and had signed up so that in the same way that we've got somebody from a pantry who goes and picks up Little Caesars and just brings it back for her pantry, there were people at OSU who were claiming particular runs for a student group or something like this. And we would absolutely love for that to be a thing that continues and expands, especially in this moment of people starting to be more around campus. It was hard to advocate for that in, say, the spring and summer. It's like, we would love to have rescuers, but also please don't be going out if you should not be going out. But also we would love to have people help and get food. So it is a balancing act. But in this moment of there seeming to be some light at the end of this particular tunnel, if there are ways that we can help facilitate something like that happening, and or if any of you individually would like to be involved, please be in touch.
Yeah, definitely. I know Food Recovery Network is the student organization who is currently operating at OSU. They do cover most of the OSU cafes, but I can put them in touch with you and see how you can help them. Also, Emily, if you can send me these, I think I have both the links, but any other information that you'd like us to send to our listserv, which is around 150 people, we can reach more people or more students who might be interested. So
that would be fabulous.
And just a quick note about the website. For the Food Rescue website right now is in beta testing. So it's a website. It will soon, I hope, be an app, as it was before, but it is right now something you have to bookmark. Thank you all.
Yeah, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, Susan and Emily, for talking to us. And I'll be in touch with you soon.
Great, thank you.
That for you.
Thank you.